Hello everyone, my name is Chris Titley and welcome to the Fintech Australia podcast. The Fintech Australia podcast takes listeners on a deep dive across the fintech industry in Australia, focusing on the challenges, opportunities and big stories our community faces. Let's get to today's episode. Hi, it's Chris Titley here, and as part of the Fintech Australia podcast, the first episode actually for 2024, I'm joined by Matt Vitale, co-founder and CEO of Birchal. Matt, thanks so much for being the first episode this year.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having me. And thrilled to be the first episode. So welcome back, everyone.
Welcome back indeed. We've gone past the school holidays. Everyone's back at school now and back into it. Let's look back at Birchal from the early days, Matt. We don't have to go back to the story because a lot of the Fintech Australia listeners are fully aware of what Birchal is and what Birchal does. But just going back a little bit to the early days and then let's get on to 2023.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. We're a crowdsourced funding intermediary. Crowdsourced funding is a relatively new way for early stage businesses to raise capital online. It's a regulated regime, so we help companies make regulated offers of securities online. Some unique features, real game changers of the legislation is that proprietary limited companies can have an unlimited number of shareholders because anyone that acquires their shares through a crowdsourced funding offer isn't included for that 50 shareholder test, which would require you to be public. And we can advertise these offers online in a far more liberal way than really any other offer of securities. There are more mature crowdfunding industries overseas. We've been really inspired by the UK and increasingly the United States. And this is becoming an increasingly popular and credible way for early stage businesses to raise capital. Birchal's completed 249 successful offers since we launched in 2018 and about 196 million in funding volume through the platform. So a couple of big milestones coming up.
Yeah, for sure. 250 must be imminent, I would imagine.
Yes. So we've got three EOIs live on the platform at the moment. Our first one's for 24. So, yeah, one of those will tip us over.
Let's go back to sort of the COVID era, 2020, and there was a sort of a mass array of funding for fintechs and startups, broadly speaking, around that era and even into 2021 and 2022. Can you talk about how you've navigated those various cycles of funding, being the platform that you are and the different types of sort of investing sources that are out there?
So ours being an entirely online process was extremely appealing for businesses through COVID. Running a business through that period, everyone remembers it was extremely challenging. It was fast moving. And for us, it was the first real inflection point for our industry. It made a lot of businesses that may have not considered crowdsourced funding look at us as a viable option, while people couldn't do the things that they usually do to raise capital, like go to in-person networking events and coffees and things like that. So that was definitely a help. But even thinking, since the funding environment has become challenging with rising interest rates and inflation, I think we'll look back on this as being another inflection point for the growth of the crowdsourced funding industry. Although our funding volumes have been stable over the last few years, there hasn't been that growth that we experienced going into 2021 and the early part of 22. Stability at the bottom of the cycle, when other parts of the financial system have sustained, pretty massive drops in funding volumes, is quite a remarkable thing. And in a similar way to businesses being attracted to crowdsourced funding through COVID, through these challenging funding conditions, we've started to host offers for companies that might have otherwise considered an IPO process if conditions were different. And we've always seen that crowdsourced funding is incredibly beneficial on a number of vectors for companies, the storytelling aspects, having a large number of shareholders, but companies are actually putting this into practice and realizing the benefits and presenting, valid case study examples for others to consider as well. So,
Matt, it's the crowdsourced funding, CSF. I mean, it's a name which is pretty synonymous with equity raises and things like that, but it's also probably veers into other areas, maybe like Kickstarter or GoFundMe, etc. How do you sort of differentiate yourself when people, maybe at the backyard chat say, well, we're involved in crowdsourced funding? You're like, oh, you're raising money for a charity or someone else, for instance?
Yeah, it's it's an ongoing challenge for us. Crowdfunding, I think most people's minds will go to things like Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and these are reward crowdfunding platforms, which is an entirely different model to what ours is. Reward crowdfunding, you get something nominal in return. People are backing a project, or donating to a cause like on GoFundMe. That's not what we do. These are regulated offers of security. So, when I'm talking to founders, I invite them to consider us as a vehicle to aggregate multiple types of investment. It shouldn't really be thought of as a discrete form of funding. We've had VCs invest through Birchal. We've had family offices, high net worth individuals, not just mum and dad investors, which I think is what most people automatically go to when they think of crowdsourced funding. But that's a challenge and an opportunity for us to raise awareness for, what we actually do. And I think what I'd say is that crowd term probably is unhelpful for us. We're starting to see a movement of platforms overseas, particularly WeFunder out of the States, that are calling these things community rounds. Johnny Price from WeFunder, his view is that every round should have a community aspect to it. If you're doing a $100 million round, hive off $5 million for your customers. And, I think it's a credible, reasonable position to say any company that is customer obsessed, companies are obsessed with customer obsession at the moment. If you are customer obsessed, then, how can you not be considering a community funding round involving your passionate customers and fans to be investors as well?
That's a good point. Do you see a lot of businesses that really approach their customers with invitations to invest and sort of the take-up rate on that? Because I would have thought there would have been an enormous amount of loyalty and word-of-mouth referrals once someone becomes a shareholder.
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. And there's lots of examples, but focusing on some of the fintechs like Mercury in the States on WeFunder, they did this really effectively. I mean, this was a business that was venture backed, that had lots of investment, but they decided to do a community round because it was critical for what they were trying to achieve. And closer to home, Friday, Fintech Australia member Mike and Ben and their team. We helped them raise $3 million in early 2021. And, they had a waiting list of, multiple thousands of people that were helping them develop the product that they were ultimately going to bring to market. And people supported that raise. They wanted to see that product in market. So they were prepared to commit capital and really grateful for the opportunity to support them. So, particularly for fintechs, and that's a B2B platform. They're targeting small businesses that are wanting to improve their financial admin and get more hours back in their day. But it was an opportunity that appealed to a wide audience of people and a very relatable problem, and they've been able to use it effectively and have gone on to do amazing things.
They certainly have. Matt, interested to know what 2023 looked like from an industry point of view and then closer to home, a Birchal point of view.
So the industry facilitated approximately $72 million in funding volume in 23, which interestingly was the same as 22 and the same for 21. So that's that stability piece that I referred to. Birchal was responsible for 52 million of that in terms of funding volume, and again, of similar proportions over the last 3 calendar years. The strongest categories were, again, food and beverage. Interestingly, non-beer food and beverage this year. Craft beer has been a very strong subcategory But last year, for a variety of reasons, they weren't as active. But non-beer, food and beverage was really strong. Also, medicinal cannabis was strong. But as I said, it was a tale of two halves. The first half was pretty quiet, and people still, I think, getting their heads around the funding environment and what investment looks like in a higher interest rate environment. But a lot of momentum built in the second half of the calendar year, and we finished our busiest quarter ever with 27 completed deals in the 3 months to 31 December.
And in amongst all those deals was a Birchal deal, mate. Do you want to talk about that process and how that ended up?
So this is the second time that we've used our platform to raise capital. Our first one was a very different kind of raise. We raised $3 million in a couple of hours, and this one was challenging, and it was a great opportunity to use our platform, also experience what a lot of our founders are going through, but also test a very different kind of offer. In contrast to our first offer, which closed very quickly, our second one went 9 days. I think we completed the day before everyone up stumps for the year, 21 or 22 December. But we raised $2.4 million. We have about 15 or 1,600 shareholders now, and it was. It was a challenging funding environment. Yeah. We didn't have the growth. We weren't able to point to the growth that we had going into our first CSF offer. It was a down round, which required a lot of engagement and conversation with investors when we were pricing the offer and in the lead up to the offer. But we felt it was an opportunity for us to not only raise the capital that we needed, we had a capital need, to show some leadership in terms of being able to get deals done, even a down round in an environment like this. But that validation of enough people out there saying, we know things are tough, but what you're doing is good and it's worthwhile. Please continue. Was personally very validating, fulfilling as a founder, and I know for our team.
Now, you set a precedent there in terms of going through probably the whole experience as your own business through the platform, knowing, including things like down rounds, which people sort of have to consider or potentially consider in this environment. One further and final question until we get on to what's happening in fintech locally. But what does 2024 look like, mate, and what's the plan?
Super exciting. As I said, a lot of momentum through the back half of last year, and we're carrying that momentum through into this year. As I mentioned, there are some categories that we're incredibly strong at, and businesses have found a lot of success with crowdsourced funding. But there are other industries that perhaps haven't been as active, but they've been really successful case studies, and that's our focus, is expanding the footprint for CSF. It is an amazingly flexible piece of legislation and a great way for early stage businesses to raise capital. I've got a view that every offer should be a CSF offer. I really should. And more and more people need to be thinking about how they can use this, build communities and raise capital at the same time. So we're going to be incredibly focused on, businesses that perhaps might have otherwise considered an IPO process. We think that there's an opportunity to help businesses while the IPO window remains shut, and it may be for the foreseeable future. That doesn't mean that businesses should stop. That doesn't mean that investors aren't interested in backing them. And then also looking to, help other types of businesses that might be thinking that crowdsourced funding is not for them, to, kind of change this assumption that this is what other types of businesses or certain types of businesses do. We are a fintech. We have raised successfully, twice on our own platform, and it's incredibly energizing as a founder to be building a community and getting that support from people and the capital you need. So growing the industry. And speaking of the word community, this is the Fintech Australia podcast. And last year we had many successful events, including Intersect, where I believe I caught up with you. And are you looking forward to what's happening in the Fintech Australia calendar this year? And also, what do you think, the industry is looking like? 23 was a pretty rough year. Yeah. And we love being part of the Fintech Australia community. When I think back, ours is a new industry, and pretty early on, Fintech Australia got us together, the crowdsourced funding platforms that were members of Fintech Australia, to prepare a submission on the industry funding levy, which government and ASIC had put in place. And someone just got it wrong in government. Someone just got it wrong and didn't really think about how the formula that they were proposing for crowdsourced funding industry would have killed our industry. And Fintech Australia got us together, and we put a submission in place, and it got fixed. And that alone, think about like how Fintech Australia and this community has supported us and our journey in this industry. That was critical in in something that I can point to, very tangible benefit that we've gotten from being a member. And I love participating in the Fintech Australia events, and love kind of meeting everyone. We need to be incredibly proud of the industry that we built. I know it's been a tough year, but in terms of fintech as an industry and the businesses that we're producing, we do really compete on the global stage, and it's something that should be supported, and we want to support with funding, which is a common issue among early stage businesses.
It sure is, and definitely the numbers of Intersect over the last couple of years have ticked up as an example, where I think it ticked over 1,000 last year, and getting people together face to face and connecting and understanding what's out there and the significant problems that a lot of these fintechs face, including funding and the possible solutions, I think is wonderful, and look forward to events in 2024. Particularly Intersect and many other events through the year. Matt, great to have a chat again. Thanks for being the first member of the Fintech Australia podcast this year in 2024, and really look forward to catching up in person.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks for listening to the Fintech Australia podcast. I'm your host, Chris Titley. The Fintech Australia podcast is a collaboration between Fintech Australia and Sub11. For more information about membership options, news and the events coming up, jump on to the Fintech Australia website. Have a great day. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.